Imagine for a moment that the story you thought you knew, the narrative that has been passed down for generations, might be incomplete. What if there were teachings, words, and wisdom attributed to Jesus that were silenced, buried, or even deliberately concealed for centuries? Teachings that could transform the way you understand not only Christianity, but the very nature of life, the soul, and the universe itself. Today we are going to journey into the heart of mysteries that were hidden for so long. We will explore shocking revelations within the teachings of Jesus that the established powers feared, that scribes and authorities dismissed, and that seekers of truth have whispered about through the ages. Stay with me until the very end, because the last revelation we uncover will not only challenge your understanding of faith, but could completely reshape the way you see your own spiritual path. Before we dive in, let me invite you. If this subject fascinates you, if you are hungry for hidden wisdom, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with others who are seekers like yourself. Comment your thoughts along the way, because your reflection could inspire someone else's awakening. I promise you, revelations are coming that may forever change how you view Jesus, his teachings, and your own place in the cosmos. Now, let us begin. When we think of the figure of Jesus, most people envision the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the texts endorsed by the Church, recognized as official and inspired. Yet what few realize is that these writings were chosen from among dozens of Gospels circulating in the early centuries of Christianity. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Philip carried radical, mystical insights into the words of Jesus. Insights that were deemed too dangerous, too liberating, or too disruptive to the order of religious authority. Take, for example, the Gospel of Thomas, discovered in the sands of Nag Hammadi in 1945. Unlike the narrative-driven Gospels of the New Testament, it is composed of sayings, short statements attributed to Jesus, stripped of context but rich with depth. In one striking passage, Jesus declares, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that it is you who are the children of the living Father. Think about that. The kingdom is not a distant promise reserved for the afterlife, but a reality already present within and around us. A kingdom accessible through self-knowledge, through inner awakening, rather than through external authority. This teaching alone would have unsettled those who sought to control the faith. For if every soul carried within it the light of the divine, then the mediation of priests, temples, and rigid structures would no longer be necessary. Imagine the threat this posed to an institution built on hierarchy and control. No wonder such texts were hidden, declared heretical, and buried. But this is only the beginning. Let us reflect. What does it mean for you personally to believe that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant place but an inner state, already alive within you? Does this possibility not shift the entire landscape of how we approach prayer, faith, and spirituality? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this is a question that has echoed across centuries of seekers and mystics. Now let us consider another suppressed truth. In the canonical Gospels, Jesus often speaks in parables, in symbolic language meant to provoke deeper reflection. Yet in these hidden texts, the emphasis on hidden knowledge, on esoteric wisdom, becomes undeniable. The Gospel of Thomas again records Jesus saying, "Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death." Here, immortality is not presented as something granted from outside, but as the result of understanding, of awakening, of interpreting the hidden truth. Do you see how revolutionary this is? Salvation in this vision is not merely a reward handed down by divine decree, but the blossoming of consciousness, the unveiling of truth within the human soul. It suggests that eternal life is discovered in the very act of awakening to the divine essence within oneself. This connects directly with Hermetic traditions, with mystical philosophies that also speak of divine sparks hidden within humanity. It resonates with the wisdom of the ancients who taught that to know thyself was to know the universe and the divine. Could it be that Jesus himself was guiding his listeners toward this same realization, one that transcended dogma and invited each soul into direct communion with the divine? And yet, we must ask, why would such a message be suppressed? Why would the early church insist so heavily on uniformity of belief, on obedience, on external rituals, while dismissing these profound words of self-discovery? The answer may lie in the very power of such teachings. A people who discover the divine within themselves become ungovernable, unshackled from fear, and impossible to manipulate. As we journey through these revelations, keep in mind that each layer we uncover brings us closer to a radical truth about Jesus and his message, truths hidden beneath centuries of silence. And remember, the final revelation we will discuss will be the most powerful of all. So let me ask you again, what would it mean if the true teachings of Jesus were not about obedience to external authority, but about awakening the kingdom already within you? When we peer into the history of Christianity, we often see a story shaped not only by spiritual inspiration, but also by political power. The early centuries after Jesus were marked by debates, councils, and fierce struggles over what should be considered orthodox and what would be cast aside as heresy. This struggle determined not only what texts we read today, but also what truths were silenced for generations. Consider this: the Council of Nicaea in the year 325, convened by Emperor Constantine, was less about purely spiritual matters and more about unifying an empire through a single centralized doctrine. Disagreement was not only a theological risk, but a threat to political stability. Thus, teachings that emphasized inner awakening, personal divine connection, and spiritual independence were deeply unsettling to the powers that sought to consolidate control. Now let us turn to one of the most fascinating of the hidden texts, the Gospel of Mary. This gospel, associated with Mary Magdalene, presents her not as a minor figure, but as a disciple who understood Jesus at a profound, spiritual level. In it, she is portrayed as receiving hidden teachings directly from him, teachings about the ascent of the soul and the liberation from material illusions. Yet, in the narrative of early Christianity, her voice was silenced and her role diminished. Why? Because the implications of her gospel are revolutionary. The Gospel of Mary speaks of the soul's journey beyond the physical, through layers of reality, stripping away attachments and illusions until it unites with the divine. It portrays salvation not as blind adherence to authority, but as a deeply personal inner transformation. Imagine the shock this must have caused in a world dominated by rigid hierarchies. If Mary Magdalene could be a bearer of such profound wisdom, then every seeker could hold within themselves the same potential for revelation. Let us pause and reflect. What does it say about the human soul if the path to salvation is a process of shedding illusions, of awakening to one's true essence? What does it mean if the divine is not confined to temples or clergy, but woven into the very fabric of who we are? Share in the comments how this vision resonates with your own journey, because these questions are at the heart of what it means to live a spiritual life beyond boundaries. As we move deeper into these suppressed teachings, we must acknowledge the tension between what is revealed and what is concealed. The Gospel of Philip, another text buried for centuries, dares to speak openly of mysteries that the official church would later obscure. It speaks of the sacred union, the mystery of the bridal chamber, not as a mere ritual, but as a metaphor for the soul's ultimate union with the divine. Here, salvation is described in terms of intimacy, of union, of oneness, not of submission to external authority. Scholars such as Elaine Pagels, in her work on the Gnostic Gospels, emphasize how these writings offer a radically different vision of Christianity. Instead of a faith rooted solely in dogma and hierarchy, they present a path of personal gnosis, direct knowledge of God. In this vision, Jesus is not a distant figure to be worshipped from afar, but a teacher and guide pointing toward the divine spark already within each of us. Think of the implications. If the essence of Jesus' teaching was not simply about rules, but about awakening, then his words become a mirror in which we can discover our true selves. What does this say about the power that lies dormant within you, waiting to be realized? Could it be that the most shocking revelation is not what is written in books, but what is already inscribed upon your soul? The suppression of these texts is not merely a historical accident. It reflects a deliberate choice to emphasize obedience, conformity, and external authority over inner freedom and spiritual awakening. For centuries, the Church feared that such teachings would decentralize power, shifting it from the institution to the individual. And in truth, they were right. For a person who realizes the kingdom within, who awakens to their own divine spark, cannot be easily controlled. Imagine now how different the world might look if these teachings had been fully embraced rather than hidden. What if, instead of centuries of guilt, fear, and submission, Christianity had flourished as a path of inner discovery, empowerment, and unity with the divine? What kind of societies would we have built if self-knowledge, rather than blind obedience, had been the cornerstone of faith? These questions are not just historical curiosities. They are alive today, waiting for seekers like you to rediscover them, because the truth, once buried, cannot remain hidden forever. As Jesus himself declared, "He who seeks will find, and to him who knocks it will be opened." These words echo across the ages, reminding us that the search for hidden truth is not in vain. But remember, we are only halfway into this journey. The revelations ahead will reach even deeper, touching upon mysteries of life, death, and the very purpose of human existence. The most profound truth, the one hidden longest and shining brightest, awaits us still. So let me ask you once more, if salvation is not granted by an external authority, but discovered within, how would that change the way you live your life? How would it alter the way you see your struggles, your hopes, and your spiritual journey? Reflect on this, because the path we are about to take will confront the very foundations of what we think we know. Throughout history, whenever truth has threatened the structures of power, it has been concealed, distorted, or buried. The teachings of Jesus that emphasize awakening and inner knowledge were no exception. But when we look closely at these suppressed writings, another layer of shocking revelation emerges. The relationship between Jesus, the nature of the soul, and the profound destiny of humanity. In many of these hidden texts, Jesus does not simply present himself as a savior to be worshipped from a distance, but as a revealer, a guide who awakens others to their own divine origin. The Gospel of Thomas records him saying, "If they say to you, 'It is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." These words point us toward a radical truth. The divine reality is not far away, not reserved for a chosen few, but already present within all creation. Think about what this means. If the kingdom is not a future reward or a distant location, but a present reality hidden within you, then the journey of faith is no longer about waiting, it is about awakening. The search for God becomes the search for self, for to truly know yourself is to discover the divine spark that has been with you all along. This revelation is echoed in the mystical traditions of many cultures. The Hermetic texts of Egypt taught that, as above, so below, as within, so without. The Upanishads of India proclaimed that Atman, the soul within, is one with Brahman, the eternal reality. Could it be that Jesus was giving voice to the same timeless truth, that the human soul and the divine are inseparably united? And yet, this teaching was obscured. Why? Because it dissolves the boundaries of control. If every person carries the divine within, then no external institution can claim sole authority over truth or salvation. The Gospel of Philip even goes so far as to say that ignorance, not sin, is the true prison of the human soul. Ignorance is the mother of all evil, the text declares. Ignorance leads to death, but those who are of the truth will not die. Salvation then is not about appeasing an angry God, but about awakening from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light. Let us pause here. What if the true bondage of humanity has never been sin in the way it has been taught, but ignorance of our divine nature? What if the true liberation is not found in rituals or external sacrifices, but in the awakening of consciousness? This question is not merely theoretical. It challenges the entire foundation of how we live and what we believe. Share your reflections in the comments, because this is not a question to be answered lightly. It is one that could redefine your very existence. Now let us explore another suppressed insight. In these forgotten texts, Jesus often speaks of transformation, of becoming fully alive. In the Gospel of Thomas, he declares, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Here, salvation is portrayed not as something imposed from the outside, but as a dynamic force already dwelling within. To bring forth the divine spark is to step into life. To ignore it is to be consumed by one's own unawareness. Do you see how revolutionary this is? The responsibility is no longer on external structures, but on each of us individually. Each person becomes the guardian of their own awakening, the bearer of their own light. This is both empowering and daunting, because it places the path of salvation in your hands. It suggests that no matter what you have been taught, no matter the burdens of guilt or shame, the divine spark within you has never been extinguished. This aligns with the mystical interpretations of early Christian thinkers, like Origen, who believed that every soul carried within it a seed of divine potential. It also resonates with the writings of Meister Eckhart centuries later, who proclaimed that the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Such words echo the very same truths that were once branded heretical, but continue to surface across time, whispering to those who are ready to listen. So let me ask you, what lies hidden within you that you have not yet brought forth? What light, what truth, what potential still waits to be revealed? Could it be that the very struggles you face, the doubts you carry, are the very soil in which the seed of divine awakening can grow? As we move closer to the final revelation, it becomes clear that the message of Jesus in these hidden teachings was not about building walls of exclusion, but about tearing them down. It was not about dividing humanity into saved and damned, but about awakening all people to the divine unity within and beyond them. And perhaps the most shocking part is this: these truths were not meant only for an elite group of mystics. They were spoken openly, preserved in secret, and now revealed for anyone with the courage to seek. The journey, however, is not yet complete. One final, profound revelation awaits us, one that carries the potential to transform how we see Jesus, how we see ourselves, and how we understand the very purpose of human life. So stay with me until the end, because the last truth we will uncover is the most powerful of all. We have traveled far together, uncovering hidden fragments of wisdom, listening to the whispers of forbidden gospels, and rediscovering truths long buried beneath centuries of silence. And now we arrive at the most powerful revelation of all, a truth so radical that it reshapes not only how we see Jesus, but how we see ourselves, our destiny, and our connection to the divine. The hidden writings suggest that the ultimate message of Jesus was not merely about obedience, morality, or ritual, but about union. Union with the divine, union with one another, union with the entire cosmos. The Gospel of John hints at this mystery when Jesus prays that his disciples may be one just as you, Father, are in me and I am in you, that they also may be in us. Yet in the suppressed texts, this idea is made even clearer. The Gospel of Thomas declares, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inside like the outside and the outside like the inside, then you will enter the kingdom." This is the revelation. Salvation is not about escaping the world, but about dissolving the illusion of separation. The deepest truth is that there is no distance between you and God, no unbridgeable chasm. The kingdom is realized when all opposites are reconciled, when we awaken to the unity that has always been present. The divine is not above us, beyond us, or apart from us. It is within us, around us, and through us. Think about what this means. For centuries, humanity has lived under the weight of division, sacred and profane, pure and impure, saved and damned, human and divine. But in this vision, those divisions collapse. The human soul and the divine essence are revealed as one reality. To awaken is to realize that you have never been separate from God. The spark within you is not just a reflection of the divine, it is the divine itself, hidden under layers of ignorance and fear. This is why such a message was considered dangerous. For a church built on hierarchy, on the idea that only through its sacraments and structures could one approach God, the notion that every soul already carries divine unity was intolerable. If the divine dwells fully within each of us, then no institution can claim to stand between you and God. Power shifts from the external to the internal, from authority to awakening. And yet, this is precisely what gives the teachings of Jesus their timeless power. He was not pointing us to something foreign, something outside ourselves. He was calling us to remember what we already are. As the Gospel of Thomas records, "You are from the kingdom, and to it you will return." The journey is not about becoming something new, but about remembering the truth that has been forgotten. Pause for a moment and let this sink in. What would it mean for your life if you were not separate from the divine, but already one with it? How would it change the way you see your struggles, your relationships, your purpose? Would fear still hold the same power over you if you realized that the light of eternity already burns within your soul? This revelation is not an abstract idea. It has the power to transform how you live each day. It invites you to see the divine in yourself, in others, and in the world around you. It calls you to a life of awareness, compassion, and unity. It frees you from the chains of fear and replaces them with the joy of awakening. Throughout history, mystics have testified to this truth. Meister Eckhart spoke of the divine birth happening in the soul. Plotinus described the journey of returning to the One. The Sufi poet Rumi sang of dissolving into the beloved. And here, in the hidden words of Jesus, we find the same truth. The kingdom is not elsewhere. It is here. It is now. It is within you. And so, the most shocking revelation of all is not simply that some texts were hidden or that certain teachings were suppressed. The greatest revelation is that the truth cannot be hidden forever because it lives within you. It is written not only on parchment but in your very being. The divine spark cannot be erased. It can only be forgotten. And once remembered, it changes everything. So, as we close this journey, I invite you to reflect deeply. What does it mean to live as one who carries the kingdom within? What does it mean to awaken fully to your divine nature? Share your reflections in the comments, because your words may awaken someone else to the same truth. And if this exploration has stirred something within you, if it has opened your heart to possibilities you never considered, then make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with others. For these truths, long hidden, are meant to be revealed, not just to scholars or mystics, but to every soul who seeks. Remember this: nothing is hidden forever. The light always returns. And the greatest revelation of Jesus is not about what we must become, but about who we already are. Children of the living Father, sparks of the eternal flame, bearers of the kingdom of heaven within. The hidden has been unveiled. The secret has been spoken. And now the choice is yours. Will you continue to live as though you are separate, or will you awaken to the truth that has been within you all along? Thanks for looking.